Welcome to the State of the East Bay, a joint event of the East Bay Economic Development Alliance, the East Bay Leadership Council, and Innovation Tri-Valley Leadership Group. I'm Lynn Naylor, the CEO of Innovation Tri-Valley Leadership Group, joined by my colleagues, Mark Orcutt, CEO of East Bay Leadership Council, and Stephen Bader, Executive Director of the East Bay Economic Development Alliance. We're delighted that so many of you are with us this morning to hear from leaders of our two county boards of supervisors, represented today by the Honorable Nate Miley, President of the Alameda County Board of Supervisors, and John Gioia, the Chair of the Contra Costa County Board of Supervisors. I also want to share a quick special thanks to Tim Sabranti, our public policy leader here at ITV, who worked with Stephen and Mark on this program this morning, and offer a quick warm welcome to ITV's brand new board chair of just a few days, Stephanie Beasley, top strategy advisor from Sandia National Labs. We're especially delighted to have our one of our major East Bay partners in the conversation this morning, as Oakland International Airport is a fantastic partner to all of us in the East Bay, not only keeping our business leaders in flight, but also helping us with critical goods movement throughout the 580 corridor in the Tri-Valley and the entire region. So there's obviously lots of conversation and interest in being part of this event this morning. So I'd like to turn it over right away to Mark Orcutt of East Bay Leadership Council.
Hey, good morning, everybody. My name is Mark Orcutt. I am the President and CEO of the East Bay Leadership Council. Thank you, Lynn, and thank you for joining us. Before we get to today's program, we wanted to quickly highlight why our three organizations have been working together on various issues of regional importance. Many of you in the audience are members of at least one of our organizations. In a few cases, may actually be members of all three. Thank you for your membership if that's the case. But most of you probably don't know that while each of our organizations has its respective members and spheres of influence, we also recognize that some cases, particularly infrastructure, housing, and transportation, require us all to come together to express and harness our collective power with one voice. We believe that only then, through our collective advocacy, will the East Bay start solving some of the most deeply entrenched challenges we face. And only then will we ensure that our home remains a place where businesses start, stay, and grow, the core value of all three of our organizations. It was in this same spirit of collective impact that we invited Port of Oakland Director Danny Wan here with us today to moderate our discussion. We're grateful he's here. I will now turn it over to Stephen Bader from East Bay EDA to introduce Danny.
Thank you, Mark, and good morning, everyone. Stephen Bader, Executive Director of the East Bay Economic Development Alliance, or East Bay EDA. And again, we're excited to be joining forces with the East Bay Leadership Council and Innovation Tri-Valley on this fantastic event, which we actually haven't held since 2019, and it was in person. Even though, of course, we're at the point where we can connect together directly, it was actually more conducive to have today on a webinar. So we're happy to have you all joining us. Let me go ahead. Our moderator today, as Mark said, is Port Director Danny Wan, and he was appointed to that post in November 2019. 4 months into his job, the COVID pandemic arrived, and one of Danny's first major accomplishments was coordinating the safe arrival of the Grand Princess cruise ship in the Port of Oakland in March 2020. Danny serves as the president of the California Association of Port Authorities, or CAPA, and has a long history at the port, first arriving in the 1990s as external legal counsel. He served as deputy port attorney from 2005 to 2008, and in 2012, he was promoted to chief port attorney. Prior to the port, Danny has served as an Oakland City Council member, becoming the first openly LGBTQ council member in Oakland history. Today, we're pleased to have with us Port of Oakland Director Danny Wan, who will also exercise moderator prerogative to share a few things about the port before he gets into conversation with our two supervisors. Thank you. Danny, take it away.
Well, thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Len. Thanks, everybody, for inviting me to be the moderator today. I'm so honored. And good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's State of the East Bay discussion. And first, let me say that I thank you for the moderator's prerogative, because I do want to take a little bit of opportunity to fill everybody in on the Port of Oakland. Like Lynn says, we operated Oakland Airport, and we're so happy that we're able to provide convenience for the businesses and the residents of the East Bay. And I'm always fond to say that Oakland Airport in the East Bay actually serves millions more people than San Francisco Airport. So we are happy that to be there and to provide that service. And also, people probably know that the Port of Oakland runs the seaport, but maybe people don't know what is that. The Port of Oakland is actually the first port on the West Coast to switch to container terminal containerization of our cargo ships, and which is today the predominant way that we ship goods. That is an innovation that the port is being proud of. I think I want to point out that the next innovation that the port is going to be embarking on is the green evolution. Just last week, the Port of Oakland was awarded $119 million for infrastructure from the state. Governor Newsom's budget last year allocated money for the ports investment for the very first time in California, and we received $119 million of that for infrastructure upgrades to convert many of our equipment to green technology. This will allow cargo ships to plug in to electrical power to eliminate diesel emissions. We're increasing the capacity of electrical vehicle charging stations to support zero emissions vehicles used in our maritime department. And let me just pull up something here. And this is the sort of the grants, the infrastructure grants that we have received. And we are seeing the fruits of what we talk a lot about, which is the federal government and the state government investing in infrastructure. And we, the Port of Oakland, is going to use that money to really make sure that we shore up our infrastructure and do the conversion to green energy. And this chart shows all the things that we're already doing at the Port of Oakland that are going to be in place and in progress. Hydrogen and fuel cells are definitely going to be part of the mix, as well as battery electricity. And we are very in the midst of trying to figure out, as we convert to electricity, how we're going to have that grid capacity brought to the Port of Oakland. I like to say that the Port of Oakland is going to be one of those areas, as we talk about today, of the state of the East Bay and our economy, and where the centers of job creation and economic activity is going to happen. I believe that the port, where the airplanes, the ships, the trucks, the railroads, and the people come to the shoreline, is going to be the center of that, one of those innovations of how to develop green energy technology and to actually figure out how to implement that. So I look forward to be part of the East Bay, to be that technology innovation that we're going to be very much involved with. So I'm going to stop that. So coming back to our speakers today, we are very, very happy to have our two longtime supervisors who we were just talking about before the session, that between the two of them, they're probably some of the longest serving board of supervisors and the most experienced. I think they have know our areas well, and they are going to be sharing some wisdom as to what the East Bay has in store for us in terms of economic development, in terms of we can expect in terms of job creation and green energy innovation, as I pointed out. So I'm going to stop talking now. I'm going to give Supervisors John Gioia and Supervisor Nate Miley, today our two special guests, about 5 minutes each to give us some opening thoughts as to where they think the East Bay economic development and economic direction is going. Let's start alphabetical. Supervisor John Gioia, Contra Costa County. Welcome, and I'll turn the mic over to you.
Thank you, Danny. And, both Supervisor Miley and I have had the pleasure of being colleagues of Danny Wan. I served with Danny on the East Bay Mud Board in the 1990s, and I know Supervisor Miley served with Danny on the Oakland City Council. So we have that in common. And I just want to acknowledge the great leadership, Danny, you've provided at the Port of Oakland. I've, of course, had a chance to work with Danny during my 7 years as a member of the California Air Resources Board, where I had a chance to really work with the Port of Oakland on its transition to zero emission and clean energy. And I just want to acknowledge their leadership. And just to follow up on Danny's comments, I think we are fortunate, and Nate and I talk about this a bit, we are fortunate in Contra Costa and Alameda that 4 of the 5 longest serving supervisors in the state are on our 2 boards, Supervisor Carson, Supervisor Miley, myself, and then Supervisor Federal Glover. And I think it's a testament to the fact that, you know, we've been committed to working on county and regional issues, and we have strong relationships, not just amongst ourselves, but in the region. And that is, I think, always so helpful in getting important work done. And I want to acknowledge the 3 organizations sponsoring this. You're great partners to local government on all of this. And the main topic I'm going to talk about, I think, will involve involvement from all of you. I want to first say, before getting into the whole issue of jobs and economic development, that I don't need to tell you that counties were on the front lines during the pandemic, since this is the first time we've spoken since the pandemic started. You know, Alameda and Contra Costa were in the group of first counties in the country to do shelter in place. And, you know, that saved lives. It saved our hospitals from becoming packed and potentially overcrowded. So the leadership of our health directors and our counties, I think, was vital, and we stepped up. You know, both our counties have strong public health and departments and hospitals and clinics, and we were on the front lines. And so I think our visibility as counties went up during the pandemic. And in Contra Costa, in the middle of the pandemic, we passed a 1/2 cent sales tax to bring in about $110 million a year for a lot of health and safety net services and emergency medical and fire. And I think that was because the public realized the important role that county government plays. And so think about that. In the middle of a pandemic, we passed our first 1/2 cent sales tax. We had not had a local sales tax in Contra Costa, so it was our first one. And it was on the heels of the failure of the Contra Costa Transportation Authority sales tax earlier in that year. So I think people realize the importance of what we do. So I wanted to talk a bit about sort of the transition that's happening in Contra Costa from industry, you know, from traditional fossil fuel industry to renewable and zero emission. You know, Contra Costa is the 2nd most industrialized county in the state after Los Angeles. I mean, we are fortunate in the East Bay to have 2 diverse economies in Alameda and Contra Costa counties, which is why we've been able to sort of weather various storms. I think we have 2 strong counties that are well managed with a strong business base, a great diverse population. I think the best part of the Bay Area is the East Bay. And Contra Costa has 4 oil refineries. Well, let me just backtrack for a second, because this issue is going to also involve regional agencies. Both Nate and I serve on many regional agencies where we get to work with many of you and advance a lot of local issues on the air. I'm on the Air District. I'm on the Bay Conservation Development Commission. I'm on the San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority, and used to be on ABAG, but no longer. So these regional agencies play a very important role in the topics I think we're talking about. So in Contra Costa, we have 4 oil refineries. There's one in Solano. And if you haven't heard, most of you have, 2 of those 4 received permits from the county to transition from processing fossil fuel crude oil to renewable fuels, things like soybean oil, animal fat, things like that. An interim fuel that's going to be needed on our pathway to zero emission. And so as part of that, what we are working on is a stakeholder effort, and we are in the process of reaching out to groups like the 3 of yours, to Supervisor Glover and I on our sustainability committee, to focus on how do we as a county, from an economic standpoint, from a workforce standpoint, from an environmental justice standpoint, an environmental standpoint, health standpoint, how do we transition to the new energy economy and attract the jobs for a new energy economy. And we were fortunate to receive a substantial federal earmark from Congressman DeSaulnier for this process. And we are bringing together business, labor, environmental justice, frontline communities, workforce development systems, education systems, local government, to really look at a strategy that we can develop that allows us to position ourselves. Second, we're in the midst of redoing our general plan, first time in over 25 years, that also is changing policies in the general plan to help encourage that. Assemblymember Grayson sponsored a bill to create a green empowerment zone in Contra Costa, made up of that board will be made up of the county and cities and others. I'm the county representative to that. And we're just going to have a kickoff meeting in the next couple of months to look at what kinds of incentives should we ask the state or we can develop to attract the right type of clean energy, new energy economy businesses to Contra Costa. So that the Green Empowerment Zone includes most of the waterfront cities along our industrial belt from Antioch to Richmond. And it also complements the northern waterfront effort that Supervisor Glover has led about how do we position the northern waterfront for businesses. In conjunction with that, we've established a sea level rise committee of Supervisor Burgess and myself to sort of go into deeper detail on top of what BCDC is doing, which is developing a resiliency plan for our shoreline, which is also important for businesses. So those efforts of basically just transition efforts of the Green Empowerment Zone, the Northern Waterfront, our stakeholder process that Supervisor Glover and I are developing, something we want to talk about more with you as we position Contra Costa. So those are some opening comments, and look forward to more discussion with you.
Thank you, Supervisor Gioia. What I think I'm going to do is I made some notes while you're talking, so I'm going to come back to you after Supervisor Miley's comments and to follow up on some of the things you say. And then we have some general questions that we're going to pose to you in terms of the economy as a whole in the East Bay. And then we'll go to the audience question after that. So if you have any questions, please, as you hear comments that you trigger some question, please put your question in the webinar chat. And I think Stephen or Lynn or somebody will be asking those questions later. So let's go to Supervisor Miley, one of our former colleagues as well, but long-time experienced supervisor who will give us some wisdom about the economy as he sees it.
Okay, well, thank you and good morning. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak this morning and appreciate the fact that the East Bay Economic Development Alliance, East Bay Leadership Council, and Tri-Valley Innovation is holding this morning's State of the East Bay. And once again, thank you for inviting me. And it's a pleasure being here with Supervisor Gioia and Port CEO Danny Wan. So let me just start by saying John mentioned the fact that he and I and my colleague Supervisor Carson and John's colleague Supervisor Federal Glover are some of the longest serving folks on the county level. I just want to state though that my feelings are that I would have thought the work would have gotten easier at this point in time. It really hasn't gotten easier. It's gotten much harder and much more difficult. COVID clearly had a profound impact on all of us throughout the country and throughout the world. It's something that none of us have ever experienced in our lifetime. And then, we've had challenges, and I know we'll talk about some of those with housing and homelessness and public safety and other factors that are impacting our quality of life. So these are some really difficult times and difficult issues. So let me just initially state that in 2023, the unemployment rate in Alameda County was about 3.7%. But there's been lots of growth in the healthcare, manufacturing, and technology sectors during the pandemic. And despite some signs, things have slowed down in certain sectors. The market continues to be strong, the labor market. Predictions about recession are widespread, but headlines mask other factors, including an aging and shrinking workforce. Some positive signs of activity in various corridors and neighborhoods throughout the county and region, but the recovery from the pandemic has been very uneven. In Alameda County, many changes in the past few years with unexpected passing of two of my colleagues. We've had to face the fact that Supervisor Wilma Chan and Supervisor Richard Valle passed within 15 months of one another. So we've lost two supervisors that probably brought close to 50, 60, 70 years of experience. And then with the retirement of Supervisor Haggerty during that, prior to that, we've probably lost collectively 100 years of experience on our Board of Supervisors. But some of the good things are, we've also had a newly elected countywide officials in both the Sheriff's Department and District Attorney for the first time in many years. And recently the county balanced its budget. Our budget is $4.1 billion, and we recently adopted that budget at the end of June. Our budget that we adopted funds over 10,000 employees, full-time equivalent. 1.6 billion of that is in employee salaries and benefits. And that's a good thing because obviously county employees getting paid and having a very strong compensation package helps our local economy, even though it's challenging to live in the Bay Area. More than $800 million in funding went to direct client support that was provided by more than 260 community-based organizations. So through our budget, we are supporting resources going to vulnerable populations, but also delivering those resources through community-based organizations. Once again, that helps them and it helps everybody collectively. And then we put about $350 million into municipal services in the unincorporated areas of Alameda County. The only other thing I would like to say at this point in time in terms of an overview, the county has completed our 2023-2026 Climate Action Plan. And this plan will provide for carbon neutrality for government services and operations by 2045. The Climate Action Plan puts us on a path to complete a fleet electrification assessment, but also launched electric vehicle infrastructure projects. And we are also evaluating our facilities to better manage space and utility usage. Because as people work more remotely and there's more of this people working some in person, some remote, and kind of sharing that type of work engagement at times, the county recognizes that our need for certain amount of space will needs to be reevaluated, and that needs to be assessed as well. So those are some of the things I want to just state at the beginning in terms of an overview, and I'll talk a little bit more about some of the specifics as the questions come up. So thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Miley. I think I'll do a follow-up with you, riff off your comments now, and give your answer. So I think many businesses and our entrepreneurs in the counties would agree that the best economic development policy any government agency could adopt is to make sure that public safety, people feel safe, people want to come here and be innovative and creative, and that and also recently in the news, there's many talk about the homeless situation in the East Bay, also detracting from the sort of the environment that economic the business can thrive in. So you mentioned, you touched that on your speech, your 5-minute opening, that those are some of the challenges that we face as counties. And the county of, like you said, is having lots of investments into making that environment better. So what is your forecast? What is your thinking on how we proceed in terms of those sort of quality of life and safety issues in which businesses can thrive? You are muted, I think.
Sorry. I think it's going to be important that we look for avenues of collaboration and collective efforts so that we eliminate some of the us against them kind of scenarios that I think have been perpetuated, not just locally, but throughout the state and even, nationally for that matter. I think that's a big factor. I think another factor is we need to begin to reestablish a sense of accountability for behaviors that are impacting our quality of life and our public safety. I know as one mayor of a prominent city in the Bay Area stated, if we can't get a handle on public safety, then we're really not basically doing our job, and I'm paraphrasing it. So we really need to see how we can establish a sense of accountability for behaviors that are impacting quality of life and reduce the fear factor. And even though people might be, even though the statistics say one thing about crime, the perception is totally different. And we always know reality is one thing, but perception is really what people look at. And with retail theft, with breaking into cars, with sideshow activity, with so much going on, it has produced an atmosphere of fear. Fear for just normal citizens walking and shopping and going about their daily lives. So we need to try to get a handle on that. So along with collaboration, working together, addressing the fear factor, I think the final thing I would say is working, and I really appreciate the three organizations that are putting on this event today, working so that we can get on a page and basically singing from the same sheet of music in terms of moving the East Bay forward. And one example of that, I feel, and I can talk more about this a little bit later too, is through the Bay Area Housing Finance Authority, of which I serve on, we're looking to put on the ballot in 2024 a housing bond that will, if it passes, will raise billions of dollars of funding for affordable housing. And if a constitutional amendment is approved, will also allow for flexible spending of those funds as well. So it won't just be for capital, we'll be able to use some of it for operations. So I think having us all as a region rowing in the same direction, I think is extremely important. And clearly the port is a major, piece of that puzzle.
Thank you, Supervisor
And
Miley.
can I add something about homelessness?
Yes,
I appreciate, yeah, I think Supervisor Miley's comments are totally on point. I wanted to add, because counties are on the front lines working with cities on homelessness, and we realize that is really a top issue for our communities. So in fact, Supervisor Miley's colleague, Keith Carson, and I serve on the executive committee of the California State Association of Counties, and CSAC has been working over the last year, and it's with principals of reform of the state's system of care and homelessness. And basically, our belief is, and we have mental health systems, public health, substance abuse programs. Counties are on the front lines of a lot of this. And ultimately, we believe that the system in California to address homelessness is broken and needs to be reformed. And even with the governor, to his credit, has invested more money to address homelessness, but we have not reduced the number of homeless on our streets. Think about this. Even with the best programs, we're swimming upstream in a system that is broken, that does not define the role of the state, the cities, or counties. It just provides funding. There's no clear accountability with outcomes. And CSAC has been totally focused on linking funding to accountability. And we've been working with the governor's office, with legislators, that unlike cities who are just saying, give us more money, we're saying, we want more money, but it has to be linked to clear responsibilities and clear outcomes, which is a way more attractive message to provide the legislature than just give us money with no strings. So that is a top priority for CSAC and counties across the state. So we've been spending time to get legislation to reform that system to really make progress.
Thank you. And I think what you both said, I think, is music to many people's ears in terms of business and entrepreneurial communities. I know for Port of Oakland, our tenants and our customers who create about 90,000, 100,000 jobs in the East Bay, does mention that home safety and homelessness are two of the top issues that they bring to me about. And I think we're very encouraged to hear that both of you think that the collaboration and breaking down so that the communication, especially between cities and counties, and accountability is those things you're working on. So thank you very much. I think there is a question that we're supposed to ask about housing. And just a little bit of follow-up, I guess. Just name one sort of strategy that you think in your respective counties on homelessness that you think is working. Give us an example of something that is currently working in your county on a homeless issue.
I'll say something. Our main focus is on building more permanent supportive housing, very small units. And we have set aside $12 million a year out of our new sales tax for a housing trust fund. It's not a lot of money, but it's local dollars, $12 million a year that we are using to close the gap from federal and state dollars to build housing. And we are nearly complete with a 55 unit development in San Pablo that we're converting a previously unused office building into about 55 units of small units for previously homeless individuals who are ready for housing with services on site. And we used our local Measure X dollars to close the gap from our federal and state dollars. And we worked with the city of San Pablo, which approved the project, even though the county will actually operate this project. So I think that is a strategy, using local dollars to fill the gap from federal and state dollars and to build more permanent supportive housing, small units. And I actually reached out to East Bay MUD and said, you need to not charge the normal new water connect fees. Danny, you remember what those are? Because normally those are for like 1,000-foot apartments. I said, we're building a 300 square foot unit where water demand is very low. So, to make this economically work, we also need a lower new water connect fee that's commensurate with the lower water use. So we're doing things like that. And so building more of those units, we think, is an answer, because it's about moving people out of the street into either a transitional and then into permanent housing. Because if you don't have permanent housing, people will remain on the streets or in shelters or transitional, and we don't have enough of that.
Supervisor Miley, an example of what you think is working in County of Alameda?
Yeah, and this is an interesting question, because the homeless issue is very complex. And I know in Alameda County, during the last fiscal year, we provided 1,900 permanent housing opportunities. Over 8,000 low-income households received support through our countywide emergency rental assistance program. And we put $42 million into Project Home Key at using Measure A funds. And that allowed us to provide about 242 permanent housing units at hotels. And we're also looking at moving ahead with a conversion of and building at Alameda Point and St. Regis additional facilities to provide services to the homeless, wraparound services to the homeless. But the thing is, the county has an office of homeless care and coordination. We have a countywide plan called Home Together, of which the 14 cities have reviewed, and collectively we're all working and hopefully rowing in the same direction. And we're constantly being challenged to ensure that the Home Together plan, which is about $2.5 billion, the metrics, we're looking to ensure that the metrics are achieving results annually. And if we're not achieving results annually with those metrics that we've established, then being flexible enough to make changes, I think is very, very important. The other piece I would say is, what I talked about, the housing bond, the regional housing bond. Should it pass in next year at the end of 2024, we'll provide Alameda County with about $1 billion. We leverage 3-4 to 1 for every dollar we get. So that $1 billion could leverage up to $4-5 billion of affordable housing. But the point is, even with all that money, we need to bring down the cost of building housing, because if it costs roughly $750,000 to build a affordable, a unit of housing, that is preposterous. We need to get that cost under control. Otherwise, we can raise more money, but we're just, constantly chasing our tail. So I know, Danny, you asked for one kind of thing that I thought was positive. Hopefully I hit on a few things, but I also want to talk about what I think some of the challenges are too. I think the cost of building housing, we've got to really begin to contain that if at all possible. Otherwise, it's going to continue to go up. We can continue to raise more money, but it's going to continue to go up. So we're constantly chasing our tail.
Thank you, supervisors. Follow up with Supervisor Gioia's comments. You mentioned that Contra Costa is one of the most industrial counties in the state, and you are working on this transitioning to a new energy economy, which is great, but also tied in with housing discussion just now. How do you balance between what the industrial sector in your county, which creates many jobs, and you might say the Port of Oakland is also very industrial portions of our operations, and we also create many jobs. How do you balance that, the need for sort of land and flexibility for industrial operations, and the other hand, so there's the conversion and to green energy and the compatibility with neighborhoods as we build more housing closer to the industrial areas in terms of planning? How do you see that happening in terms of the transition? Is it fast enough to make sure the industries are compatible with neighborhoods? And what is the planning as implications for the county?
Well, that's a really good and important question, Danny. Yeah, I think we can do both. I think we have enough land to do both, but siting is important. And yes, I hear it. I hear all the time from businesses and industry that say we don't want housing close to our facilities because one, it's not good from a public health standpoint. Two, it obviously constrains business operations. And on the other side, residents don't want to be near sources of pollution. So we grapple with this all the time, and we grapple with it project by project. I believe that there is a lot of room for growth in our cities, with more, we need to have housing that is more dense. The city of El Cerrito has done a great job building multifamily housing along San Pablo Avenue, a major transit corridor. There's great opportunities to do more density. Our general plan identifies that. And I do think at the same time, we're trying to identify areas that will work for business. And I'll give an example. In the unincorporated community of North Richmond that I represent, you know, we have a residential area where we are increasing housing, and it's separated from an industrial area. We try to not mix residential into that industrial zone so that we can attract the kinds of businesses that support the new energy economy. You know, many years ago, interesting history, you all remember, you know, the Guillemets and Signature Development, they had options on some of the industrial land 15 years ago before the Great Recession, and it was going to be converted a lot into residential. Then the Great Recession happened. That all did, so the residential didn't happen. And now we're sticking with industrial out there, you know, light manufacturing, preferably cleaner industries. That's what we're looking for. So I think it just has to be part of our decision-making process to be very conscious of buffers around industry and business. And it's all about siting. You know, and to add on the housing issue, you know, because there was a grand jury report, an article out yesterday about how in Contra Costa County, cities and county, we're all collectively not building enough housing, which is true. And this is a challenge to cities in both our counties, suburban cities, to create opportunities for more dense housing because they are not doing it. We are working on that in our general plan for the unincorporated area, and we have a role. We can't do it alone. There are 19 cities in our county. They need to be stepping up, and some of them are not. And all of you as businesses should put pressure on city council members and city leaders to say they need to build more housing. There's no reason why many of the suburban cities in our county aren't allowing more housing, especially around near BART. So I think that's an ongoing battle because those locations are also, many of them are not near industry. So we do need to be protective of where we want to locate business and where housing occurs. And I'm conscious of that. And I think we are in our decision making.
Thank you. Supervisor Miley, same sort of different slant on that question. As you know, all the cities have received a regional housing need allocation, RHNA targets in the county. And so talk about similar to Supervisor Gioia's comments. How do you think that pressure, how the cities are reacting to that pressure, whether they're meeting those obligations, and also how do you balance that pressure to build more housing versus land for jobs, land for industries, and land for commerce?
Ooh, that is very difficult, Dan.
Unfair question. I know.
Well, you know, I think it's helpful that the state has established new mandates for housing, and they're tying certain funding streams to the ability of local jurisdictions to reach their RHNA numbers. But those RHNA numbers are extremely daunting. In Alameda County alone, in the unincorporated area, we're going from like 1,400 units to nearly 5,000 units just in the unincorporated area in terms of the RHNA numbers. So trying to find sites is going to be critical. And then trying to look at innovations. How can we take underutilized properties? How can we take commercial sites that are not being utilized for commercial? How can we provide where there's tax deeded or tax defaulted properties, turning those into housing opportunities? How do we provide more modular homes? Obviously, continue to push ADUs. I mean, I don't think there's any one answer. It's collectively all of that. And then I think through the efforts of the Bay Area Housing Finance Authority, what we're looking at is production. We've got to produce more housing. I mean, We've been saying this for years, that we have a supply problem. We definitely have a supply problem. So we need to produce more housing. But at the same time we're producing more housing, we need to preserve what housing we have so that people who have affordable housing, who are low income, who are challenged, have housing. And then we need to protect. So we need production, preservation, and protection. So we need to protect folks in housing so they don't lose their housing and end up out on the streets. So that's the formula. And at the same time, trying to keep pace with the growing economy, to ensure job opportunities, and to be looking for ways that we can provide housing for professionals, teachers, first responders, worker appropriate housing, working with our, a lot of times we leave out the school districts, but I know, for instance, in Oakland, I mean, the Oakland Unified School District has a lot of underutilized property. So how can we take that and working with the school districts and begin to develop housing? So it's a very challenging mix of things we need to be doing, and that's why I get back to a statement I made earlier. We need to try to eliminate the polarization and the us against them, and see how we can all collaborate and start rowing in the same direction around a mutual path that's going to really uplift all boats.
Great, thank you. Switching topics, and then I think we'll address transportation next, and then we're going to go to Q&A questions from the audience. So as public transportation has been long a vital component of ensuring sustainability and vitality in our metro region, and then frankly is also a source of investment into our infrastructure. But at the same time, right now, what we're facing is the state just passed another multi-billion-dollar investment in public transportation, and yet the ridership on these transit systems are, well, falling, and fiscal cliff are being thrown around. What do you think is a need to be done in short terms over time to ensure, well, first of all, what do you think about our transportation system? Does it need some new thinking? Is there a new framework we need to be thinking about? And what do you think about what we can do to shore up our public transportation system? Again, big questions, but take whatever aspect of that you want to tackle. And why don't we start with you, Supervisor Miley, this time?
Okay, thank you. Yes, the fiscal cliff that our public transportation agencies have been facing as a result of the pandemic, it's real. And I know the state has bailed out the agencies, and I know the state's also looking at this measure for the voters to look at raising the tolls on bridges for the next 5 years. As a taxpayer, I sometimes grimace at the fact that we're constantly going to us for additional resources. And I do feel public transportation is extremely important. But we have in the Bay Area, I believe it's 27 transit agencies in the Bay Area alone. And when you look at Los Angeles County, they have 1 transit agency. So there's always been the conversation, and this goes back to when Don Ferrata was a county supervisor and in the state assembly and Senate. How can we look at consolidating some of these transit agencies for more efficiency? I'm not saying eliminate them all, but that we need to really be exploring how we can improve efficiencies. And improving efficiencies doesn't necessarily mean we are shrinking the labor force, because we need to continue to protect jobs and provide employment for all the people who are involved in these transit agencies. But how do we improve efficiencies? Furthermore, how do we get the consumer back on public transit? So even if we pump more money into it, is that going to really improve the quality of the experience for customers to want to use public transit? So if people are working from home and not commuting anymore, and not using public transit, where is that going to leave us down the road? So I think those are some of the factors. I'm really pleased and I'll put a plug in here, that we're looking to build a Valley Link in the Tri-Valley and over the Altamont to connect San Joaquin County with Alameda County. So we have a rail system to take cars off of the Altamont and help commuters going back and forth between San Joaquin and Alameda County and other parts. And this will be zero emission vehicles. I think that's a major project too. So there's a lot that needs to be done there, but always throwing more money at the problem isn't always the correct answer. And I do think the governor is right. If we're going to give more money to these transit agencies so we avoid the fiscal cliff, what measures of accountability are we putting in place? What measures of change are we putting in place so that we can be assured that the public can get back on public transit and use it, recognizing that the number of people that are using public transit might not be the same numbers that have been using it in the past for commuter purposes. And maybe the whole thinking around public transit might need to be addressed and be reconsidered as well in terms of, is it all about commuters? Does it need to be more inner city directed so that working class folks can use it? And if we have working class folks who are living further out because of the affordability of housing, how are we tying transit into that? And I think that's another piece of the equation through transit-oriented communities. So there's a lot of pieces there that I think need to really be addressed and looked at extremely carefully.
What about you, Supervisor Gioia? Do you think you're both on the air district? Obviously, public transportation is an important component of that. But today we have electric cars and we have other modes of transportation that are could be cleaner as well. So do you feel, as Supervisor Miley, that somehow public transportation needs to be reinvented, efficiency needs to be built in, and some kind of, consolidation of these different authorities?
Yeah, and let me start by saying Supervisor Miley is now much more involved on transportation issues than I am. It's been a few years since I've been on our transportation authority. However, I will offer some general comments. In my time on the California Air Resources Board, one of my colleagues, Dan Sperling, who was head of the UC Davis Institute of Transportation Studies and was sort of a national expert on transportation and transit, and he always focused on an issue which we're seeing happen now, which is transit is changing. The nature of transit is and will continue to change. And if we don't adapt, we're going to fail. And I start as a strong public transit advocate. I strongly support public transit. Many individuals rely on it to get to work, to get to doctor's appointments. But we need to rethink the transit system. It can't ask for more money to do the same old thing. It's going to have to be as part of a newly designed system. I do agree. We have too much turf going on in too many transit agencies where schedules aren't aligned because you're going from one system to another, and there's duplicative sort of administrative and infrastructure system. So yes, I agree with Nate that there needs to be some consolidation. I'm not in a position to say which ones and where, but that needs to be addressed. And we are changing so fast in our transportation system. The whole first mile, last mile issue is now important. I mean, look, BART was built a lot to take. I remember when BART opened, to take much of its ridership to take commuters into downtown San Francisco. A lot of those jobs aren't coming back because people are working remotely. And I know the mayor of San Francisco has been promoting bring the jobs back. Look, they're not all going to come back. And the reality is ridership patterns have changed. And so I know that all the transit systems are looking at that. And looking at how do they adapt to these changed ridership patterns, more remote work, job centers in different locations. And so the new funding that comes to transit needs to be aligned to being innovative. Again, I'm not involved in the details of all of this, and I know Nate and others are. But I agree with the general concepts that things need to change. There needs to be consolidation. Otherwise, I mean, we don't have the funding to continue business as usual. And I know, but I want to acknowledge transit agencies, I think for the most part are looking at this and thinking about it. But people I have found in government over my many years in office, unfortunately, is that politicians and agencies don't like to give up their turf, even when it makes sense to do that. I tend to think very regionally. Our problems in the Bay Area are regional in nature, whether it's air quality, water quality, transit and transportation, homelessness, housing. And if we don't start thinking with the big R on our forehead, we're not going to solve these problems. And we have to get away from just thinking about what it means for our individual agency and think about what does it mean for the region. And what we have a system of government that isn't well set up for that. We get, you know, if you're an Orinda council member, you know, you're just elected in Orinda, and, you know, and Amy Worth did a great job of thinking regionally when she was on MTC and other regional agencies, but not every council member from a small city does that. And so they may be voting against issues like maybe voting against housing in their community because their constituents don't want it, even though it may make sense for the region. So I think we have a larger problem, and that's I'm trying to here in the Bay Area, that locally elected officials are not incentivized to think regionally to solve problems. I do think folks like Nate and I, who come from large districts and counties, we tend to be more regional. We need more of that thinking to solve our problems.
Thank you. I think that's also encouraging words for many of us. I just want to read a comment from Liz Ames, who is a BART director. Thank you, Supervisor Miley. I'm a proponent of transit consolidation study of transit agencies. We need a new transit business model to get some customers and riders, given we're in an era of telecommuting. And then we have a comment from Yolanda Finch. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. Many of us in the Tri-Valley are still going to San Francisco and Oakland for networking events and conferences. It's very scary as a woman traveling alone to use BART when there are so few riders, especially when events end at 8 or 9. Helping riders feel safe will go a long way to increasing ridership. So those are kind of comments I'm seeing on the chat related to the topic we just talked about. One other topic I want to bring up, since we did talk about agencies, many of the businesses in the Bay Area, and frankly, a lot of the public agencies are working within a lot of framework of many regulatory agencies in the Bay Area as well. So both of you on the BACMed. So the question in the chat is, there's been many great deal of staff changes, and I would say some might describe as turmoil over there in the last couple of years. Can either of you speak to how the leadership there is stabilizing and changing in terms of cultural and direction at BACMed?
Yeah, I'll say something. I mean, Nate and I are former chairs of the Air District Board, and I will say I think we have stabilized that. We have a great new executive director and a great new general counsel. Our executive director, Phil Fine, was like a number 2 or 3 person at the South Coast Air District for many years, and then was selected by President Biden to have a senior position at US EPA. It's great to have him in the Bay Area. And I think with those 2 new positions in place, I think we have stability and we're moving forward.
Okay. I think enough said on that, right? Or Supervisor, do you have any comments to add to that?
I would ditto what John's saying, and then also through the Air District, we're putting much more of a framework around equity so that we can ensure that communities that have been challenged with poor air quality are being heard and their concerns are being addressed.
Great. All right, Supervisor Miley, I know you are itching to answer this question. Is the Oakland A's deal in Las Vegas falls through? Is there Howard Terminal site still viable for a new stadium, or what is the county thinking about? We might bring that back to the Bay Area, since many of us count Oakland A's as an economic development stimulus.
Yes, you know, we should never say never. So the deal in Las Vegas hasn't been totally consummated. And so there's always a possibility the A's might end up staying in Oakland and in the Bay Area. But well, it's moving quite along the track towards a conclusion there. But if we don't have the Oakland A's, I don't see the glass as half empty. I see it as half full. It's unfortunate we lost when I say we, the city of Oakland and the county lost the A, or is losing the A's, and lost the Raiders and the Warriors. And it's great the Warriors are still in the Bay Area. They're not necessarily in Oakland, but when we start looking regionally, it's great that the Warriors stayed in the Bay Area, because it does help the region out. In terms of the Coliseum site, the fact that the A's will probably be leaving, I think produces the glass half full as opposed to half empty. There are opportunities there. I think the biggest opportunity is with the African American Sports and Entertainment Group in terms of fulfilling the specific plan that the city's approved for the Coliseum area. That would include retail, entertainment, sports, office space, potentially, new governmental or public sector development. There are many things that can take place on that site, including housing as well. And so I don't necessarily see it as it's like you can see it as an opportunity, the flip side of the coin. And I know there's a lot, the fans have a right to be upset. And as a fan, I'm upset. But when it comes to the A's leaving, but as a policymaker, it's my responsibility to see how we can work with the A's to have, if the A's decide they want to continue to play ball at the Coliseum until their new facility is built in Las Vegas, then let's look at how we can work on an extension of their license agreement so they can continue to play at the Coliseum. And how can we work with the A's on a smooth transition? How can we work with the A's to try to get the A's to sell their interests that they're buying from the county, to sell their interests to the African American Sports and Entertainment Group, so that group has total control of the entire site? And when we think about an African American group having control of probably the largest developable site in Oakland, it's just tremendous. It would be monumental, and talk about the ability to bring about some measure of reparations in terms of programmatic and policy reparations. I think that would be colossal as well. And keep in mind, even when we had the sports teams there, the A's, the Raiders, the Warriors, the city and county were still subsidizing the fact that they were there upwards of $25 million a year. So the fact that they're leaving produces opportunities, I think, at the site. So I'm not one to say, well, the sky is falling and, oh my gosh, everything is going to be bad. I do commiserate with the fans because I'm a fan as well. But as a policymaker, I think that site is a very prime site. We've got the rail, we've got Amtrak there, we've got BART there, we've got the freeway there, we got the Oakland Airport under the Port of Oakland nearby. I mean, that is prime real estate for development. And so I'm very hopeful. And finally, I'll just say, we've been working with Oakland Roots. We've been working with Oakland Soul for soccer. Soccer is extremely popular. We've been working to bring a WNBA team there. So the glass is not half empty, it's half full. And that's how I look at it. And that's going to be the mindset that I continue to pursue.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I'm on BCDC, and as you know, Danny, we voted that the Howard Terminal site, that we don't need that site for ongoing port uses, which opens up the use of that site to really still some other alternative. So if it's not the A's, obviously we're hoping it'd be the A's, this presents some opportunities possibly for the port, for the county, for the city of Oakland to look at some other type of development on that site. We look forward to, if there's not a last minute deal to keep the A's in Oakland, which I'm a big A's fan as well, that site could also get used for some non-port use that will add value to Oakland.
You're muted, Danny.
Thank you, Supervisor Joy, and reassure you as Board Director that there's lots of discussions about how the Howard Terminal site can be used for revitalizing our retail and commercial entertainment access waterfront kind of use. But along that same lines, Supervisor Joya, and along the same lines of Supervisor Miley says about the importance of having sort of retail and entertainment corridors in our cities. As we know, in downtown San Francisco, there's a departure of many businesses, retail businesses, and there's a lot of talk about this doom loop that's happening in San Francisco, and the departure of of hotels and department stores. At the same time, we are seeing the phenomena of neighborhood retail corridors becoming quite revitalized.
Right.
So, Supervisor Joy, how do you see the county working with the cities to rebuild and revitalization of neighborhood corridors, striking the balance between large business in downtowns and small businesses in neighborhood corridors?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I mean, the nature of retail is changing, right? With more online purchases, which has raised warehouse issues that I may talk about for a second, because there are some, talk about warehouse issues for a second, but the buying habits have changed. You're right. Neighborhood retail is being revitalized, and we're seeing that across Contra Costa as well. And which gets to the whole housing issue as well. We're finding people want to live where the action is happening. And there are cities in our county that are doing a good job of building more dense housing in retail districts. And you can take downtown Walnut Creek as a great example of that. El Cerrito's doing that. Richmond's exploring opportunities. I think so. While we only have land use control over unincorporated areas, so we're focusing on those policies for unincorporated areas. The idea of again bringing housing and commercial activity together, I think there are that is something we're going to need to do to build the supply of housing that Supervisor Miley talks about that we need, and so I think there's opportunities. Plus, building the housing in those retail districts creates more demand for the retail, right? Putting more shoppers living in a neighborhood helps the retail. I represent El Sobrante, which is unincorporated. We've changed our general plan from in that area from all commercial to mixed use to allow housing with commercial. I think that's the future. So you're not just segmenting downtowns away from housing, they are more together. And a lot of the research shows that younger people like that kind of housing and choose that kind of housing. So one of the things, in terms of also how that impacts jobs is people's commute patterns change. And so people do shop where they work, and we're establishing more job centers in Contra Costa that will help retail as well, because retail can locate where these workers are during the day. So I think patterns just have changed. And I want to say something related to this on warehouses, because the one concern we have is there's more online purchasing, companies like Amazon and others, have been building new warehouses around the Bay Area. And really, I'm talking about fulfillment centers that have many impacts, truck impacts, pollution impacts. And what we've done to address this is, because people want jobs, but they don't want the associated pollution that may go with some of these facilities, we've required the fastest transition to zero emission fleets anywhere in the country in a couple of centers in North Richmond. And FedEx is about to complete one in North Richmond, and they're holding it up as a national model. I think in the Bay Area, we are doing things first. While the state has set timelines on fleet electrification, we've been doing it faster. We're saying if you're going to locate, for example, in North Richmond, where there is also housing not near the warehouse, but in other areas, we want to make your operations be clean. And so that's something we're hearing from residents. So I think that's an issue the Bay Area is going to have to grapple with, where these fulfillment centers go. We don't want them to affect residential neighborhoods, where is their appropriate land. Yeah, we had to declare a moratorium in North Richmond because we didn't want North Richmond becoming wall-to-wall warehouses. We wanted to preserve some of our industrial land for light manufacturing, for the clean energy economy business. So we're not there just to accept any job or business that comes in. We're trying to be thoughtful and say, if we have all this industrial land, we don't want wall-to-wall fulfillment centers. We want to bring in high-value jobs for light manufacturing and clean energy.
That certainly is a discussion that the Port of Oakland is very much involved in. As you probably want to guess, the seaport depends on supporting auxiliary industrial uses along in our communities as well. So yes, planning to accommodate all those is very important. And in terms of green energy, I certainly hope to work. I think the businesses here listening, as well as the port and the counties, will certainly need to solve the puzzle of the reliability of our electric grid if we're to convert to green energy at some point. So there was a question there about that, but I don't have time to ask that full question. I think I need to wrap it up with one last audience question, and then we'll turn it back to Stephen. This is for both of you. Thank you for your presentation. You're both drawing so many different directions, as demonstrated by your answers today, because of the variety of challenges facing the region, because they're constituents of a wide variety of needs and issues. But the theme that sometimes we have heard is that it's the government agencies, especially between counties and city councils, need to work together. So if you were mandated to take only 3 issues, along with all mayors, council members, and board members of spectrums of agencies, what 3 issues would you be talking to them about so that you can try to solve them together? Actually, let's narrow down that 2. I just take that top 2 issues. If you were mandated to work with councils and other agencies to together collaborate on making sure we solve an issue, what are those 2 things that you see hope in terms of collaboration? Commissioner, I keep saying commissioners because my board members are commissioners, but Supervisor Miley, what is your answer to that question?
2, that is just very difficult, but I think one thing would be a mandate push to address the mental health crisis that confronts our communities, because a lot of that mental health crisis adds to the homelessness issue and adds to the quality of life that we're facing. It adds to issues on public transportation, issues in downtown areas, like, the doom loop. I don't know who comes up with these, these catchy phrases, but I think a mandate around addressing mental health and providing facilities for treatment, providing, through care courts, providing mandatory treatment. And I think that's something that is going to be, will be required. So I think mental health is one of those things. And I think probably the other thing would probably be around a collective strategy that ensures public safety and ensures and reduces the fear among the broader populace about traveling and living in the Bay Area.
Thank you. Supervisor Gioia.
Yeah, and as Nate said, it's always hard picking 2 because someone's going to say we think some other issue isn't important, and there's many important issues, more than 2. But and my first is similar to Supervisor Miley, except I'll expand it to homelessness. I think we're not going to, because mental health issue crisis in our system of care is a large part of homelessness. So I think we need, cities and counties in the state need to be working together without pointing fingers and blame and on the issue of homelessness. I think there's lots of opportunities to do that. Sacramento County and City have an agreement, an MOU about how they're working together. We're looking at trying to do that in Contra Costa. So that's one. The second, I'll say, just because we see all these numbers about how great the economy is in the East Bay and lower unemployment, which is true, but that masks the disparities that exist across our communities. And I represent a part of the county that has some pretty wide disparities with regard to income and unemployment and things like that. So I would say really focusing on youth services, because cities and counties together can do a lot, especially counties on the social service and health side, cities with park and rec, and working with school districts. I think school districts, cities and counties together can make a big difference in the life of families, because there's so many young people who can't afford, I mean, you know, in terms of the need, who get out of high school, looking for careers, can't afford housing. For example, we use some of our sales tax dollars to place a social service family navigator at a middle school in Richmond to work with families and students there to help them navigate and access to resources. So I think we can do a better job, you know, working with school districts and cities.
I just one quick follow-up on the homeless collaboration question, and then we'll end there. Turn it back to Stephen. Is I think many of us are curious. We do hear about this agreement between counties and cities and state in terms of which each responsibility is on homelessness. Just very quickly, what is the delineation in your mind between counties and cities in terms of solving the homeless problem? What is
right?
Because yeah.
So I mean, I mean, here's the problem. State law doesn't specifically designate it. That's the problem. So we're talking about what does it look like, and we're telling the state, have your money flow down to cities and counties with clear lines of responsibilities and agreements between cities and counties. So clearly, land use authority for siting facilities is mostly, you know, cities occupy more land in our county than the unincorporated area. So the cities can play a major role in siting and approving things. We can for the unincorporated areas, but it's a small area. Of course, Nate has a large unincorporated area in Castro Valley, I think the largest in the area. But so cities can play a better role in siting projects. I think that's key. Counties traditionally, you know, do health and social services and mental health, which is an underfunded system already. We do a lot of the service component. Cities would do a lot of the siting component, but I think we can both play a role in actually financing construction. Like, you know, the site that I mentioned, the 55-unit permanent housing site in San Pablo, we're funding it, even though it's in the city. So I think there is no one magic answer. There needs to be more just an agreement about what cities and counties will do in their county, knowing just that under the law, we have a lot of service responsibilities and cities have the land use responsibilities.
And Supervisor Miley, do you see that same delineation? Do you see a lot of duplication between cities and counties, or do you see working it out so that each agency has a clear jurisdiction and cooperating with each other? How do you see? Is it duplication? Or is it collaboration?
I think it's more, we need to be moving more in direction of collaboration. And I do believe our Home Together plan that the county put together with the 14 cities moves us in that direction. And with our ability to alter matrix and metrics as we go move forward, I think is helpful. And I do think the counties are responsible for service delivery. We need to be delivering services to the vulnerable populations, to the homeless. And then the cities need to be working on, as John pointed out, land use, building housing, ensuring housing of all levels, all ranges, all possibilities. And then between both the county and the city, but maybe more so counties, working to have facilities, treatment facilities, congregate shelters, things of that nature as well, so that when people come out of these facilities that maybe the county is responsible for, the city then has housing for folks to go to. So I think those type of delineations, services, permanent and various housing, and then facilities, supportive type housing facilities would be the three tracks I would pursue in terms of mandates, if I could, from the state.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your very, very thoughtful answers to these questions. They're very tough issues as well. And thank you for the audience for asking such thoughtful questions as well. I'm gonna turn this back to Stephen thank you very much for this opportunity.
Right, well, really, and this is not just me, but this is, of course, the East Bay EDA, the East Bay Leadership Council, Innovation Tri-Valley. But let me just say, that we really just appreciate the great, thoughtful responses and conversation here today. Thank you, Danny, Supervisor Gioia, Supervisor Miley, and Mark and Lynn. I'll let you all close this out. So.
Well, thank you, Stephen. Really grateful for the partnership and the great conversation. Clearly a lot of challenges that we faced as a region, but some great leaders in place to help us chart a path to a brighter future. So really grateful for everyone's attendance today and look forward to our partnership going forward.
Thanks for your partnership with us.
I would just add that we love the spirit of collaboration and solution-based leadership. So thank you all so much. Great to be together this morning.
Thanks.
All right, well, thank you very much, everybody, and see you next time.